Hi, everyone, and welcome. You're here because you want to get to the heart of big ideas fast. We've got Pietro Ubaldi's Fragments of Thought and Passion. Quite a deep text.
It really is. Ubaldi covers a lot of ground: philosophy, spirituality, society. He's wrestling with some huge questions about where humanity is going.
Exactly. So our mission today, to pull out the absolute core insights for you. We want you to grasp Ubaldi's main points on human evolution, spirit versus matter, his vision for the future, all without getting bogged down.
Consider it your focus briefing on Ubaldi.
Yeah, we'll touch on some really interesting stuff. What he thought real religion was about, the, well, surprising role he saw for suffering, his idea of a Superman.
Which is quite different from what you might think.
Right, and what this all means for, our own inner development. So let's dive in.
Okay, maybe start with his ideas on religion. He made this really key distinction.
Between the religion of form and the religion of substance, yeah.
Exactly. The form is, well, the external stuff, the denominations, the buildings, the specific rituals.
The things you can easily see and categorize.
Right. But Ubaldi argued that that's not where the real difference lies. The actual division, he said, isn't between, say, Christians and Buddhists or Muslims and Hindus.
Okay. So what is it then?
It's between people who are genuinely sincere and honest in their spiritual path, whatever it is, and those who are, well, false or dishonest. And you find both types in every religion.
That's quite a different way to frame it. So it's about inner integrity, not the label you wear.
Precisely. It's about your personal authenticity and your commitment to core values like loving your neighbor.
And he felt that true spiritual movements shouldn't necessarily aim to create new religions.
No, not at all. He believed their real power was in revitalizing the existing ones, bringing them back to that core substance, that inner essence.
Interesting. And he mentioned consequences for not living up to that standard, something about losing God's protection.
Yeah, he talks about the loss of protection of God's just law. It's like if you consistently violate that fundamental principle of love and respect for others.
You sort of disconnect yourself.
Exactly. You disconnect from a kind of natural, harmonious order and become more vulnerable to, let's say, the consequences of imbalance and discord. It's less a punishment, more a natural result.
So this idea of unity and love, he saw that as part of our evolution, even in religion.
Oh, absolutely. He saw a general trend towards unification everywhere.
Yeah.
Science, politics, society. And he believed religion would eventually follow suit.
Moving from rivalry to what? Collaboration.
Collaboration, mutual understanding, love. That was his hope, his vision for the future of religion, driven by this deeper evolutionary current.
Okay, let's shift to that core idea then, evolution. For Ubaldi, it wasn't just, Darwin's survival of the fittest.
No. Biological evolution was part of it, sure, but he emphasized the spiritual evolution of humanity even more. He thought we're in a really critical phase of that right now.
Moving away from just accepting truths handed down.
Right, like revealed truths from Scripture alone. Moving towards a more independent collective investigation, using our own minds together.
And science was an example of this.
A key example, yeah. Humanity collectively using reason and observation to figure things out. That, for him, was a form of spiritual evolution in action.
Okay, now, suffering, that's always a tough one. Ubaldi's view seems different, not just random awfulness.
Definitely not random. He didn't see pain or suffering as, like, divine punishment. He saw it more as a reaction.
A reaction to what?
To imbalance, to being out of sync with natural or spiritual laws. It's a signal, a teacher, really. It guides us, sometimes painfully, towards progress, towards correcting that imbalance.
So it's necessary, but can be overcome.
Yes, necessary in our current state,
Yeah.
but something that evolution, particularly spiritual evolution, allows us to transform.
Yeah.
We learn from it, we adapt, and eventually the need for that kind of suffering diminishes as we achieve greater harmony. It could even be transformed into happiness, in his view.
Wow. Okay. So challenges aren't just roadblocks, they're feedback.
Vital feedback mechanisms, exactly, for us as individuals and for humanity as a whole. And this links to his idea of a biological revolution.
Leading to a new superhumanity.
Yes, a future state where our biological nature itself reflects his more advanced spiritual consciousness.
That term superhumanity. Let's hold that thought and look at how he saw spirit and matter relating. It wasn't a conflict for him.
No, more like a necessary polarity. Complementary forces. He used the church and state sometimes as an analogy.
Spiritual power and temporal power.
Right. A healthy society needs both, interacting in balance. One shouldn't completely dominate the other. They need each other.
And he saw a similar dynamic globally between East and West.
Yeah, that was a fascinating observation. He characterized the West as, very active, driven, materially successful, but perhaps spiritually underdeveloped
In
sometimes.
the East.
Maybe more inward-looking, spiritually rich in tradition, but potentially lacking in material dynamism or progress. He saw them as two halves of the human potential that needed to integrate,
A global balancing act.
pretty much.
Yeah.
And he was very clear that material progress on its own, well, it's not enough.
It has to serve something higher.
Exactly. If it doesn't serve spiritual growth, if it just becomes about accumulating more stuff or more power, it can actually become a form of slavery.
Yeah.
We become enslaved to our own material desires.
Okay, let's circle back to the Superman. You said it's not the common idea like Nietzsche's.
No, definitely not. It's crucial to get this distinction. Nietzsche's Übermensch is often interpreted as, a figure of power, will, maybe beyond conventional morality.
Right, the will to power.
Ubaldi's Superman is radically different. It's about an integration. Yes, there's will and intelligence, but they're fused with heightened sensitivity, empathy, and above all, goodness. Ethical development is absolutely central.
So it's more about inner quality than outward dominance.
Absolutely. It's a higher state of being characterized by virtue. And he talked about a specific turning point to get there.
The crisis is spiritual, a conversion.
Yes, a spiritual crisis or conversion.
Right.
He saw it as this profound shift in consciousness. It's not always dramatic, but it involves a breakthrough of intuition, a deeper feeling of connection to the universe, to something larger than the self.
And that's when the real transformation towards this higher state begins.
That's the idea. It marks a fundamental reorientation of the personality.
And this affects our basic drives, too, our desires, passions.
Oh, definitely. They don't just disappear, but they get transformed, refined. They move towards higher expressions of love beyond just personal attachment, towards a more universal altruism, even self-sacrifice for the greater good. It culminates in what he called a mystical or divine love.
He also had thoughts on people who seem overly sensitive or intense, sometimes labeled neurotic.
Yes, his concept of pseudoneuroses.
Yeah.
He suggested that some individuals, particularly those with high intelligence and sensitivity, might exhibit traits that look like neurosis by current standards.
But aren't necessarily pathological.
Right. He speculated they might actually be precursors, early examples, maybe of this evolving human type. Their systems are just tuned differently, more intensely. They need understanding, not just a label.
That makes sense. And that need for understanding ties into his views on education, doesn't it?
It does, quite naturally. He didn't see education as just, drilling information into kids.
More than discipline and facts.
Much more. He saw it as an evolving art, moving away from coercion towards a deeper psychological connection, a real meeting of minds and spirits between the teacher and the student.
Focusing on the child's inner world.
Yes. Understanding their perspective, nurturing their natural intuition. He felt children often have this innate wisdom we tend to educate out of them.
So the teacher's job is to kind of bridge the gap.
Exactly. To truly communicate, to foster understanding, not just rote learning. That was the real art of teaching for him.
Now, Ubaldi wasn't just focused on the positive. He had critiques of his time, particularly materialism.
Oh, absolutely. He called materialism the psychological illness of the century. He saw it creeping into everything.
Even agriculture, that seems specific.
It does, but it shows his holistic view. He criticized farming methods that treated soil and plants as just inert matter, purely mechanical or chemical inputs and outputs.
Ignoring the life in them.
Yes. He emphasized that soil is alive. Plants are living beings. He argued for a religious sense of nature, a respect for the vitality and interconnectedness of the natural world, which purely materialistic farming ignores.
And this focus on the material, the economic, the mechanical, it has a cost.
The huge cost, in his view. This kind of hypertrophy, this overdevelopment of the economic and mechanical side of life, often leads directly to spiritual atrophy, a withering of our inner lives. He saw that as a major sickness of modern times.
That definitely still resonates. It's interesting, too, how he connected evolution to crime to delinquency.
Yeah, his take was that a lot of behaviors we label as criminal today,
Right.
well, in very early primitive stages of human evolution, they might have been normal survival strategies.
Like the law of the jungle. Selection of the strongest, most ruthless.
Something like that, driven by basic survival instincts. So, as humanity evolves spiritually, our understanding of crime and our response to it should also evolve.
Moving beyond just punishment.
Yes, shifting focus from purely physical punishment towards understanding the psychological, the spiritual roots of the behavior, aiming for uh, education, rehabilitation, what he called the domestication of the human beast within us.
And Ubaldi's own background seems important here. He wasn't just an armchair philosopher.
Not at all. He was trained as a lawyer, but he went on this intense personal quest for deeper meaning. Lots of study, but also he wrote about his own spiritual experiences, heightened perceptions, visual, auditory, intuitive insights.
Devasseri's ideas came from experience, too.
Very much so. It informed his understanding of things like the conscious and subconscious mind.
How did he see those?
He viewed the conscious mind as more the surface level, the immediate tool we use. But the subconscious, that was the deeper, more fundamental part of us. The part that truly learns and evolves through lifetime after lifetime of experience.
So when you boil it all down, Ubaldi's message is really about inner change.
Absolutely. That's the core. Real, lasting progress. Real happiness. It doesn't come primarily from changing the world outside. It comes from the profound, fundamental renewal of the self.
Aligning ourselves with something bigger, a higher law.
Yes, aligning with the universal law of justice, love, and evolution. And he believed that as individuals and as a species ascend towards that superhuman level,
Guided by justice and this universal will.
the need for constant struggle, for defensiveness, for conflict actually starts to diminish. It leads naturally to inner peace, a deeper harmony with life itself.
Okay, so if you've been listening, the big takeaways from Ubaldi seem to be: focus on your inner spiritual journey. Really look beyond surfaces to substance. Embrace love and compassion as transformative forces.
And remember that we're all part of this ongoing evolutionary process towards, hopefully, a higher state of being.
Which leaves us with a thought to chew on, maybe. How does Ubaldi's way of seeing our inner lives shaping our outer reality and vice versa speak to the world we're living in right now?
Yeah, how might his focus on spiritual evolution change how you approach your own life, your own search for meaning and knowledge today?
Definitely gives you a lot to think about. We really hope this deep dive has sparked your interest, and maybe you'll explore Ubaldi's fragments further for yourself. Thanks for joining us.